But my beats, they are hard.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the BCSN Sports Wrap. Brian Fulford here with A.D. Drew, and we've also got joining us Dr. Kenyatta Cavil from Dr. Cavil's Inside the HBCU SportsLab. So, Drew, you know, whenever we have Doc on the show with us, you know that means we have a special, important guest joining us. And this is actually a first. In the years that we've been doing this, Drew, you know, we've had the pleasure of talking with athletic directors, conference commissioners, coaches, alumni, various people that we've enjoyed talking to, even mayors. You've talked to some mayors, but this is the first time we've had the opportunity to talk to a university president, an HBCU president. So joining us as special guest to the Sports Wrap, Dr. Makola Abdullah, the president of Virginia State University and the board chair of the CIAA. Dr. Abdullah, pleasure. Thank you for coming on the Sports Wrap.
Oh, man, the pleasure is all mine. Thanks for having me.
Yes, and I guess we got to say happy holidays and happy new year at this time of the year. And hopefully you and your family and your staff are safe and doing well at this time. Here we are at the end of the year. And let me ask this first question here. It's been an amazing 2020 in so many ways. Describe, if you can, maybe personally and professionally, what this year has been like as you think back to the last 360 some odd days.
I tell you, it has been one of the most challenging years ever. It's funny because it's hard to you said look back at the last 365 days, and if I was looking back a year from now, you know, basketball season was going on, we were getting ready for the tournament. It almost seems like a different year before March and then after March. And being hit with this virus has been one of the biggest leadership challenges that I've ever faced. And I think most of us in this world have ever faced. And then the personal challenges, right, of worrying about your family and whether you're going outside. And it's really been something else. And I think that for all leaders, particularly HBCU presidents, because we talk a lot, I know this has been a very challenging environment, and there's a lot of folks who are just trying to do the best that they can to make sure they position their university to do good things. And so I'm hoping that my people are getting the good rest. I'm hoping that they're staying safe, and I hope they're addressing their mental health. This is just a challenge, brother. It's probably the biggest challenge we've ever faced.
Right. And as we obviously, you know, we brought you on for a couple of reasons. Obviously, as the board chair of the CIAA, we're aware of the most recent news that the CIAA has decided to suspend men and women's basketball as well as volleyball on the heels of the previous fall news. And then, of course, there's great news happening personally at Virginia State. So we'll get into a little bit of that. But before we talk maybe specifically about the more recent news and the decision process for the CIAA, I'm curious about, let's go back to the end of the last school year and the academic year. And if you can give us an idea of how I guess it would be the 2019-2020 academic year ended and the uncertainty, because at that point we're at the beginning of the pandemic.
Yes.
And how the maybe financial and the enrollment things happening at Virginia State and other HBCUs, how that plays into some of the decisions 4 months down the road as you get ready for the start of fall, and even now, here we are in the winter season?
I think the biggest thing is it was such an unknown. With COVID happening, of course, it's hit the Black community harder than it's hit other people. It's been, I like to say that we've seen disparities as it relates to education, with some of our people unable to have access to the educational materials that they need and not being able to study from home because they might not have the internet or might not have the right place. It's affected us more in a financial way where more of our people are essential workers without essential pay, right? Which means they're putting themselves in harm's way and maybe not making the money that they need to make. It's affecting us more from a health standpoint, where more of our folks are dying than others. And then, of course, the criminal justice. I mean, it's related and it's tied into that. Where we're fighting for our rights continually to make sure that we're treated equal. And so the world is in such an upheaval. The regular predictive models that you have to say, well, this is many students we expect to have in the fall, those models just don't work. Particularly when we decided not to have students on campus for a residential experience, we weren't sure what that was going to look like. And so if you go back to March, when we're planning for a worst case scenario that we don't even have all the data for. And the good news is we beat all of our projections, but we were being very, very conservative in terms of what Virginia State might look like, how many students might come, what kinds of financial things we might have to do to make sure that we continue to keep going. And I think most leaders were doing it. And that was huge. And it made us look at athletics, academics, and look at everything. The good news is that students by and large came out. Students wanted to continue their education, whether they were at home or not. And so our enrollment didn't dip as much as we thought it would. The support from the feds, from the state, we got resources to help keep going. And so it was a good year in that way. But if you go back to March, it was really, how do we plan for the unknown and how can we be ready for something that we have no idea is coming? And the same was certainly true for athletics. In March, that would have been when the NBA suspended. NBA didn't come back until June or July. At that point, we didn't know whether the NBA was coming back. Nobody knew what the NFL was going to do. We were, of course, looking for not guidance, but we were looking to learn from them in terms of how they operate during the pandemic. And at that point, it hadn't happened. And so I think at that point, early in the pandemic, everything was up in the air. And I'm not so sure we thought that there was going to be a possibility of having kids in school and or playing sports. So yeah, thank you for helping me remember that. That was a tough time, brother.
Yeah. And I'm curious for as you try to communicate the unknown to not only coaches, student athletes, what does that look like from your perspective? Because obviously you're the final decision maker for your university, and even at the conference level, the commissioners work at the behest and sort of with the school presidents. So as you're thinking about how that messaging or getting that message across to athletic directors and coaches and student athletes, what is that message like? What is that? How does that look from your level?
I think it's more transparent than it probably was before, because at that point I didn't know, and I had to be as honest and forthcoming to tell folks, look, I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. This is going to be very difficult. We're going to do the very best we can. But I don't know I don't know what the decision is going to be next week. I could give you an answer today and it'd be something different next week. And so I think it forced me as a leader to be more vulnerable in terms of my communication, to let people know that we're working on it. We're planning on all kinds of things, but that I don't have a crystal ball. I don't have any more knowledge than you do. I'm watching the same reports that you are, and we're trying to make the best decisions and to try to involve people. We've had the athletic director at the table in all of our decision making. Early on, we probably had a room of 50 people that included student government and faculty senate and staff senate, where we were sitting around trying to figure out what are going to be the best things for Virginia State. And so it's in many ways, I think the positive, it's brought the family in my mind closer together, understanding that this is a huge challenge that affects us all. So, yeah.
Doc.
Yes, sir.
Dang, you don't want to
I have
follow
to clarify. Let me clarify because we have two doctors here. So I guess I should say Dr. Cavil.
Yeah, we got the doc and then we got the president.
Right.
That nomenclature on there, it's a little different there, framing. But I appreciate you, Bryan, handing that off. I wanted to get into, if you would allow me to kind of go behind the scenes a little bit. As we talked about this, setting this up as the board chair of the CIAA. In that scene, obviously, you have presidents and chancellors of their respective institutions. So oftentimes, when you're confronting with things at Virginia State University, members come to you with recommendations or they come to you with questions for answers. At this particular level, now everybody's in here with their own independent recommendations, how it relates to what's going on in their respective states. You got public and the private institutional dichotomy working when you're talking about athletics. How, if you would, in a leadership perspective, how does that look? You talked about from a macro level of the community. Obviously, for those that celebrate, this is day 5 of Kwanzaa, which is Nia, talking about the purpose of community. And I'm sure a lot of that goes into it. The athletics from a conference, particularly those that are run very strong, are community driven. And so talk to us about what does that conversation look like when you're at the table with your peers in terms of breaking down this decision that has to be rippling in many different ways in terms of what that looks like from an emotional standpoint, but at the same time, this is a leadership role which each of you talking about what is the best decision that is going to affect so many people at different levels and the economics that plays into it well. If you would go behind the screen, if you would, and unwrap that for us.
I will. First, I'll say this. We're fortunate in the CIAA that we have, I believe, the best commissioner in the game. Jackie McWilliams does an incredible job, and her leadership cannot be, I can't talk about it well enough. I'm a big fan of hers, and she does a great job. And so when you talk about, when you talk about the room and us getting together, of course, the room is on Zoom, right? So it looks like this. But one of the most incredible things is that, one, you've got a group of colleagues who are all going through similar things at their institution, right? They are all fighting for not just athletics, but academics, for their students. They care very much about their institution and their students, and they want to do the right thing. And then that translates, if you will, to the CIAA. They want to see, everybody wants to see the conference do the right thing. And so when we're together, one, it's just a blessing. I mean, you can imagine, one, we don't get a chance to see each other like we used to. We enjoy each other's company. Like there are many of us who are really good friends. And so the room is excited. It's purposeful. Nia Habaragani, I got to use purpose, right? Nia Habaragani. And it's a bunch of folks trying to figure it out. Was it perfect? No, we had some really lively discussions. But when you talk about the leadership of all of our schools, the thing that it all boiled down to is trying to do the right thing. It boiled down to that from the beginning. And if you count the athletic directors led by Clyde Dougherty, he's kind of the head of the athletic directors organization in the CIAA, that my AD, Peggy Davis, best athletic director in the country, is also on. But they had their conversations doing the same thing. And I know that the conversations were difficult. They were long sometimes, but it's centered on two things. One, what's the best thing for the student athletes? What's the best thing for the conference? And do we have an opportunity to lead? Because the CIAA has always been in the forefront of leadership. And so we weren't waiting for someone else to do something that we could do if we thought it was the right thing to do. And so there was some really incredible conversations. Part of me wishes that there could have been a fly on the wall, that you could have been there to hear them, because you would have heard really just folks saying, we may want to do X, but how do we do this together as an entire group? And people were very, very serious about that. And I think that was true from the athletic directors to the coaches. Easy decision? No. I mean, look, I'll tell you just straight out. I wish basketball season was gone. I mean, I'm a big basketball fan. I love basketball. but was it the right thing to do, right? I think that with the conference, what we decided to do as a conference was the right thing for our student athletes. It's the right thing for our institutions, and I'm proud of the decisions that we've made. We were among the first in the country to decide to suspend football, right? And so I'm proud of the leadership role that the CIAA continues to take in moving forward. Difficult decisions, yes, but yeah, I'm proud of us.
Quick follow-up, just in terms of that, in our conversations as you were doing a training session on leadership, you talk about, that stuck with me, the need at the highest level to be data-driven. Mm-hmm. And so you also talked about, just in your answer there, about the high-level people with the commissioner, your athletic director, that they're the best in the business. Talk about, how do you say that in regards to the data? What speaks to you that has given you that inclination that you're working with and in culmination with the brightest minds in terms of how they see things in athletics, as fans and media people are trying to pick up on as we decipher our ideas of what athletics is supposed to be about, what direction things should happen, and why decisions are made. If you would take us a little bit in terms of that mindset of how you use the data that you always told me should drive you in your decisions. How do you come to that conclusion that you're working with some of the best and brightest minds in the business?
Man, look, I appreciate that question. I'm gonna go big and then I'll come back down to athletics, right? So I believe in HBCUs. I do. It's not fake, it's real. I could give you my HBCU story and I would name half of the HBCUs on that thing behind Drew's head, right? In terms of having a connection to. I'm serious about it. That's our family business. My wife works at Virginia Union. We are serious about our institutions. And part of it is because I believe that our institutions are among the best in the country, bar none. There's no qualifier. If you look at the kind of work that we're able to do, if you look at the kind of transformational activities that we do on a daily basis at our HBCUs, other institutions can't match that. So they have more resources, but they don't have the kind of return on investment that we have. One of my best examples is there are schools that have better instruments. They have nicer practice fields, right? They have a director that makes more money, and they got more members, but they don't have a better band than we have at our schools. HBCU's got the best band. Well, to me, the band, if you will, is a representation of also the rest of our campus, is that we have the best biology programs, the best computer science programs. Do we have the best labs? Sometimes no. Are our faculty paid what they need to be paid relative to what other folks are paid? Sometimes no. Do we have the best faculty? Yes, we do. Not unlike the way we have the best bands. And I believe that the same is true when you start looking at our athletic programs. That when you look at what our programs are able to do with the resources that they have, there's no way you could swap a Power 5 AD for my AD, right? My AD in a Power 5 conference would kill it. She would kill it. She's used to killing it on this much. If you gave her this much, she'd kill it. You put that Power 5 AD on my campus and watch him struggle, right? You put Dick Saban on my campus and watch him struggle. You put my coach, right, on a Power 5 team, and that team would kill. And I think that's true across the board at our institutions. And so what we get caught up in sometimes is seeing places that have more resources and then saying that because this is America, right? And so we judge things in a capitalist system. So we tend to believe that those who have more are winning because they deserve it. And it's just not true. We do more and we do it better, in my humble opinion. And I think this COVID-19 has really shown that. I think one of the things that has been powerful for me is that, and again, every school, every conference has to make the right decision for them. So I'm not saying that the decision that the CIAA made is a decision that everyone should make, right? You have to make a decision based on your student athletes, your schools. But I think the thing that's so powerful for us is we know for a fact that we started with student athlete and coaches' well-being. We know that. We know that. And I'm sure other people did too, but are we positive that everybody has? And that's leadership. That shows how good we are, in my opinion, right? So I could, that to me, that's That's the data. You can any conversation with me, I'm gonna tell you HBCUs are the best. That's just how it's gonna be.
Appreciate that. Go ahead, Drew.
All right, Mr. President, I got to remember to distinguish myself because both of you guys are doctors. So you just mentioned that personal journey and personal connection to some of these HBCUs that are on this poster here behind my wall. So I'm gonna go off script a little bit. You're from Chicago, Illinois, originally. You went to Howard, came back to Chicago to Northwestern to pursue your graduate degrees. And then you spent time at 3 of the 4 HBCUs in the state of Florida, Florida A&M University, my alma mater, Florida Memorial, and Bethune-Cookman. And for some reason, you left all that sunshine and went back up north to Virginia for whatever reason. But on a serious note, kind of take us through, that journey from how a kid from Chicago, Illinois, goes through the HBCU experience and winds up becoming not only president of an HBCU, but also the chairman of the board of directors for the conference that your HBCU is in.
Man, look, let me tell you this first. I think you'll find this funny. I moved to Virginia the last weekend in January to start my job on February 1st. In the last weekend of January 2016, there was 1.5 feet of snow on the ground in Virginia. I literally left Florida to go to the snow in Virginia. But I'm excited to be here. As you can see, all love for VSU. VSU is my number one. Well, first, my mom went to Howard, and she told me, I'll tell you the short version of the story, that she would disown me if I didn't go to Howard. And that was the best decision I never made. She made that decision for me. And I got so much of a rich experience at Howard that I wanted to be able to duplicate that. I couldn't give back to my mentors. So I wanted to be able to pay it forward. And for me, that meant working at an HBCU. Brother, when I graduated from Northwestern, I sent my resume cold. This is a true story now. I sent my resume via email. In '96, everybody didn't even have email. I sent my resume to a couple of faculty members that had email at Morgan State, Howard, North Carolina A&T, and Florida A&M University. And Florida A&M called back first. I had never been to Florida. I had never been to FAMU. I drove with my fiance at the time in '96 to Tallahassee to start my career, my 15-year career at Florida A&M University. And I loved every minute of it, man. It was the thing I miss the most now is being in the classroom, because that's what I loved to do when I was at FAM. And it was a great time. But then took it on the road a little bit. Did a couple years at Florida Memorial in Miami, a wonderful South Florida's only HBCU, and then to Bethune-Cookman. So I've been on both sides of the classic. I've been on the right side. I've been on the left side. I've rooted for everybody at the classic, and then got the wonderful opportunity. Man, look, 5 years ago in February, to be the president at Virginia State University, in an incredible institution. I'm proud to lead it. I'm proud to be a part of the CIAA. It's just, I feel really blessed. I feel really blessed. And in the spirit of Kwanzaa, I feel like that I am in line with my purpose in my HBCU thing. Now, I could do the other thing and name all of the ones on the thing, right? And tell you that my wife went to Tuskegee, my mama went to Howard, my aunt went to Howard, my sister went to Dillard, my sister-in-law went to FAMU. 3 of them graduated from FAMU. My brother-in-law went to Tennessee State. My other brother-in-law went to Fisk. My son started taking classes at Bethune-Cookman. He finished at Morehouse with his bachelor's degree. He's working on his PhD in biomedical sciences, Morehouse School of Medicine. My daughter started her career at Hampton, and then she transferred to Virginia State, got a bachelor's at 19. She's now working on a master's degree at Virginia State University. So, I mean, I keep going and give you more HBCUs because I got more family members, but I believe in them. And I'm not just a president, I'm a client, right? My kids go to them. My kids went to Virginia State. So, yes, sir.
Drew, did you have a follow-up, Drew?
Man, it's kind of hard to beat that when you done named about 15 of these of the 100. At this point, I think there are 107 on this poster right here. So you named about 15 of them, and you could probably keep going and get me up to about 30 or 40 of them if we had time on this interview.
I could. If I was going to tell you all the HBCUs I gave to, that'd be another 10.
All right.
I love that soundbite. We may have to chop that up. I'm a client and a president as well. I love that. We may have to put that in some promotional pieces, Drew. That was beautiful.
It's never too early to plant the seed, to share the tradition, and instill a sense of pride in your HBCU with your little ones. HBCU Pride and Joy Children's Boutique helps you share your school spirit with a wide selection of adorable kids apparel and accessories officially licensed from your favorite HBCU. Visit hbcupridejoy.com and follow us on all social media at HBCU Pride Joy on Facebook and Twitter.
The fight isn't over yet.
You will see me choose to protect my community by wearing a face cover.
And even with my face covered,
you will see me.
As a son.
As a man with a never quit attitude.
As a fighter for change.
Join me in wearing a face cover.
To help stop the spread of the coronavirus.
Because this is one small act of kindness
that has the power to make a big difference.
This is the Dean of the College of HBCU Sports, Kenyatta Cavil of Dr. Cavil's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. Come mix it up in the lab where the course lecture is in session every Tuesday from 6 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time on Facebook Live, YouTube Spreaker, or the BCSN app, as we discuss all things about the HBCU sports culture, including exploring the week that was in the sporting HBCU diaspora, as well as the upcoming week of HBCU sports. With me, the Dean, the College of HBCU Sports, on Dr. Cavil's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. Course lecture dismissed.
It's like a loop machine. All around town, people trying to get down. It's like a loop machine.
So, President Abdullah, let me come back to the CIAA and the news. And you mentioned data because I think it was one of the talking points that you mentioned. And so I'm curious about the evaluation process when you look at the data. When you look at data as how COVID affects African Americans, how COVID affects different age groups. And when you go through the evaluation process of, you've seen how fall has gone and you've seen some schools play football. Actually all of our HBCUs did not, or at least they canceled if they started. And now we move into basketball season where we have some schools playing, some are not. The constant cancellations of games, changes, things that happen. So share with us, when you look at that data, the evaluation process of how do you balance the student, basically your stakeholders, because you've got the student athletes, you've got your fans and alumni, but then you also have the financial impact of everything that goes around with having games. Give us your thought on that decision-making process and what the data led to in this decision.
Well, I think one of the really great things about being a D2 program is that sports is still an extracurricular activity at Virginia State. So I'm not saying that there's not a financial impact, but the financial impact isn't what the financial impact of the Power Five is, right? Okay. And so in that way, I think we were able to kind of put the financial impact to the side, and we could work with the financial impact. So then it just really becomes a safety impact. And how do we, and again, not just the players, right? But you got coaches, trainers, ADs, referees, all of who may be in a difficult group, right? In a group that's more apt to catch it, right? And so you got to think about all of them and the fact that at our institutions, again, we know that that African Americans have a more challenging way to go here with catching it and with dying. Knowing that many of the people around our programs are African American, many of the folks in the communities where our folks who would referee or coach the games come from are African Americans. We start thinking about the community that we sit in and where our families sit in. And so for me, what it starts to boil down to is, and let me step off of CIAA just for a minute, but talk about the whole entire institution. We made the very difficult decision as a public institution not to have students on campus. I think it was the right decision for us for the fall. Now, having said that, and again, I hope you can hear the analogy, right? As we've watched schools have students on campus for the fall semester, we've been getting to see how people can do that well, right? That there's ways that it goes bad and there's ways that it go well. Most schools had a positive experience, and even the schools that had a negative experience were able to kind of turn that around and make it through. And so now we're able to use some of their data to look at, because we're now scheduled to have students on campus in the spring, right? But we're using the best cases and what people have learned to be able to do it better, if you will, for us. And so I think there's value in not necessarily being the pioneer and being second, and watching how people work through the challenges that they have. I think there's value in that. And so if we don't have all of the data, sometimes you sit back and collect more data. And so that's part of the data-driven decision is to collect more and see. There are some programs right now that are playing football, playing basketball, and doing it quite successfully. The question becomes, are there things that they are doing that we can adapt to be able to do that? And how do we get that information? So, we want to play. I don't think we should. I'm not of the opinion that we need to stop the world because we have COVID-19, right? We have to move judiciously. We have to move in a positive manner. But we're not, my goal isn't to, well, let's stop everything until it's over. But let's make sure that we're doing it as well as we can to make sure that our faculty, staff, students, alumni, supporters, and friends are as healthy as they can be.
That's a great point. And I think when you mentioned about at the Division II level, it's an extracurricular activity. I know when Drew and I have these conversations, and even with Dr. Cavil, is sometimes you get mixed in talking about our HBCUs that are on the Division I level in comparison to the rest of Division I, and then you have our HBCUs and NAIA schools. So it's like on these different levels, you sometimes get lost. I'll admit I get lost in the conversation sometimes because I will sometimes, and I'll admit, blanket everything sometimes. But yeah, you do have to separate Division II with Division I and understand what the priorities are. So I'm glad you said that. That was a great reminder, not only for myself, but I'm sure anyone else who might be watching and listening. You mentioned your community and from a leadership role, and I coach in Florida. Drew is an official in Georgia, so we see athletics happening in the high school levels. Different standards, I'm sure, but when you look in your community and the HBCUs and you, Virginia State, being leaders within that community, what are your thoughts? And maybe just have those entities within the state of Virginia or your community, have they contacted you? Did they come to you? Have they asked for your opinion on, hey, should we play? How are we playing? What should we do? And then what's your thought when you look at what you see in your own community as it relates to high school athletics?
Well, I think I've always got to be careful. You heard me say it earlier, and I want to make sure I say it again. This challenge is so unknown that it wouldn't be appropriate for me to judge another leader in another district or university for making a decision different than the one that we made, right? Because that may have been the best decision for their community. And so I think people don't ask me because I think they know where I stand. They've seen the press releases from Virginia State and from CIAA. And so that's one of the great things is that we're able to lead, if you will, in that way. I think that as long as communities and universities are doing what they believe is in the best interest of their community, then I support that decision, even if that's the decision to play, right? So again, I'm not anti-playing. I am anti not putting your students and your community first, right? So anybody who's not doing that, they got a problem with you now. But if you're playing and you found a way to play that incorporates the needs of your community, then I'm okay with that. I can be okay with that. So I don't want to draw a line between those of us who decided not to and those who have. I want to draw more of a line between those who care about your communities, and I believe most people do, right? Those that care about the communities and those that don't. And I think we have seen some evidence of folks who haven't really put the kids and the teachers and the parents and the refs and the coaches, because it's not just the students, it's not just the kids who are playing, it's everybody who's exposed, and so we got to think about everybody.
No doubt about it. I want to jump back in there, in that vein where you're talking about this dichotomy. And as you know, on the academic side, when we talk about sport management and the business side of sport, leaning into that conversation, there's a term we use called conference churning, which is conferences moving in and out. From a CIAA perspective, as we transition to more directly into Virginia State and things that are going. So this will be my last framework from a board perspective, chairing that board from the CIAA. As we said, we have conference churning. I'm sure you, as you said, you're following HBCU. So you're seeing what's taking place in the MEAC and the SWAC in terms of teams leaving the MEAC, particularly this last year. A lot of it having to do with COVID-19 and travel expansions. North Carolina A&T leaving the MEAC, going into the Big South, a non-HBCU conference, if you allow me to use that framework. And then obviously with Bethune-Cookman and FAMU, institutions that you have been a part of, leaving the MEAC, going into the SWAC. We've also seen it at the Division II level with the SIAC being very active with conference churning. In their case, bringing institutions in, going back as far as Savannah State moving from Division I to Division II. Some of these NIA programs moving into that. You also saw where Claflin a couple of years ago moved from the SIAC to the CIAA. Not to get into the information of what Virginia State is going to do from athletics. Obviously, everybody is telling you what to do, right? This is what you should do, Doc, President. But please tell us at least from a CIAA perspective, with, as you said, the best in the business in terms of looking at that. What does the CIAA look at when they're talking about conference churning, keeping memberships or teams leaving or bringing programs into the conference? From your perspective, when you're talking about your peers, obviously this goes back to some data-driven components. I'd also think it goes back as we talk about Kwanzaa in purpose in regards to culture. Are they a cultural fit? Are you a cultural fit? What does that look like, if you would, just from a CIAA, perspective from a leadership? What do you talk about? How do you look at it? Do you go to a consultant? Is this you all just coming in there? Do you have quiet conversations with presidents that you think would be a good member, off the record type of thing, in terms of those? Look at us, take us behind that screen again as fans and people that love HBCU sports. We have our perspective. We dictate what we want. But if you would, please share with us at least, how does that decision process take place? How does the imagination, as we understand, what does that really look like?
Well, thank you. Thank you for asking the question. I want to shout out my first real athletics mentor, Lynn Thompson, AD at Bethune-Cookman, who's the second best athletic director in the country, behind mine, of course. I got a lot of love for him, and so a lot of my upbringing in understanding athletics as a president really came from him. So one, as a CIAA, we are always, well, actually, let me go backwards. Presidents of universities are extremely competitive. I haven't met one that isn't competitive. And I haven't met one that loves athletics to the core. If you get a bunch of presidents in a room for 5 minutes, they're going to start talking about whose team beat whose team on what day. It's going to happen. It doesn't even take long, right? We quick to show off rings and all of that. I mean, you would swear. I think if people got a chance to see presidents interacting around sports, they'd be shocked, because we sound like just the biggest fans in the world, right? And so when you talk about presidents whispering to each other about conferences and who's doing what, that happens all the time, all the time, all the time. You know, you really want to play with the big boys, you need to come over here with us. What y'all need to do is come down and play with us. You know, I mean, that look, the way we talk and the way we interact, those kind of informal conversations that fans have with each other are the same conversations that presidents have with each other. And so there's a lot of talk about athletics. Usually it's a little friendly jibing and that kind of thing, but it's we take it very seriously. I think in terms of a conference looking to expand or, you know, so we just went through the process, of course, with Claflin. And I think there was, you know, they have to do their due diligence and we have to do ours. I hate to say you answered the question when you framed it, but it's, you know, are they a good fit? What does travel, you know, what does travel look like for everybody? Are they a good fit competitively? Be good fit for the culture? And I think as we started to have those conversations, we really felt that that they were, and that they'd be a wonderful, wonderful addition to CIAA. And I think the same then is true for Claflin. And Claflin has to do the same thing. You know, are they? What does travel look like for them? Do they feel like they're a good fit? Many institutions, as you know, if you kind of look at how some of the schools make their changes, many institutions will hire a consultant to kind of advise them and work through with their athletic director to kind of say, well, these are some additional costs and these are the pros and these are the cons. There's some wonderful companies that do this very well and help institutions change conferences and or change divisions. And so, you know, I'm sure that they went through a process like that. And it's like dating. You know, we dated for a while and then we decided that that we wanted to get married. But as the CIAA, you know, we are always, how should I say this? We're not in need. We're not out rushing. We have a wonderful conference. I think we like the size that we are. We like what we're able to do and the footprint that we have. At the same time, though, I mean, we're always paying attention to other schools and other places to see how that might fit. We have a membership committee that does that kind of work, and all conferences do, and they're always thinking about that. That isn't true for the CIAA; it's true for everybody. And so yeah, we're always looking and we're always paying attention.
All right, Mr. President, and I've got kind of I got two questions that I kind of want to get off. They're related, but they're not directly related to each other. So now, when you look at the current makeup of the CIAA, you've got 6 public universities, 6 private institutions. Now, when you guys are at the table, how do those conversations go when you look at public versus private? You've got schools in 5 different states, you know, competing, and when you're making those decisions, because when you go back and look at the decision not to play basketball, you had a Lincoln in Pennsylvania who was already entered their non-conference schedule, while the other 11, where 10 had not started their schedule yet, and you guys had opted out at that point. So how do those conversations go behind the scenes when you've got all those different dynamics coming together? That's question number one.
Well, it's not always an easy conversation. I mean, reaching consensus from 2 different perspectives can be a challenge. You factor in the fact that, of course, as you said, we had already opted out, but also there were a few campuses, I think us and Johnson C. Smith, that didn't have students on campus, and that would have had to bring the basketball players back to campus in order to start to practice. And so there were a lot of different situations, but to be honest, that's an athletic conference anyway. Like even when you think about travel and, you know, if you talk about the public and private, I think probably the bigger challenge is we got some schools that are way north and some schools that are way south. You know, when you're kind of centralized, travel is a little easier than it is when you're on one side or another. And so there are always things, whether it's public, private, or distance or COVID, there's always really challenging conversations that people have to come together with. I think the best part about this is we got a really great group in the CIAA of presidents. I mean, I can't say there's anyone that I don't really enjoy being around, isn't very thoughtful. And so people have the ability to represent their institution and to represent the CIAA at the same time. And that's a tough thing to do. But to a man and to a woman, to a president and to a chancellor, all of our folks are really, really good at doing that. And so it makes it a pleasure being in the room. The conversations aren't always easy, but there hasn't been a time when we haven't started a conversation that I didn't believe we were going to reach a positive consensus at the end. I knew we would. I just didn't always know what it was going to be. So, yeah.
All right, and now I'm going back to the decision now, and just by probably fate with the calendar, but obviously you guys were having these conversations. You didn't just wake up on that Monday morning and say we're not going to play. Obviously, those conversations were going on, but unfortunately, the Saturday before the decision was released about the CIAA not playing, we saw what happened with Keontae Johnson of the University of Florida on national TV in the game versus Florida State. Monday, the CIAA comes out with their decision. Friday, the SIAC comes out with their decision. Did that incident kind of factor in, maybe push up the timetable, or had the decision already been made at that point, and it was just a matter of just getting it out to the people at that point in time?
The final decision happened that day when it came out, but we had been in conversations. We meet very regularly, more regularly than we used to, because the world changes so fast. As I mentioned to you, I mean, we would typically get together as a full board, and most boards do this maybe 2-3 times a year. Nowadays, with the way the world changes, you can get together in November and the data is totally different when you get together in December. So we have to meet more often. So I would say, one, we're all very much paying attention to what's happening in the news. And so, yes, everything is a factor. But that decision wasn't, all made, as you said, on one day. It was a process that we went through, and that led us to that decision. And that process had moved quite a bit up until the point that we made that decision. So I guess it's kind of yes to both, right? It was a factor and it wasn't a factor all at the same time. I don't know if that answers your question, but I tried.
Good job.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
President Abdullah, how much optimism is there that there will be a spring season for baseball, softball, what the other spring sports? How much optimism?
CIAA doesn't play baseball, Brian.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Baseball is a conference.
But some of the members, some of the
institutions do.
See, that's why. See, yet again, that's what threw me off. Thank you for the clarification. So, what is the level of optimism for spring sports in general, regardless of the sport, at Virginia State and even amongst the conference?
I think the challenge with this is it's just so early. I mean, this would have been synonymous to, again, the decision on basketball was made middle of December, right? Was that?
Yeah.
So 3 months before then would have been like September to make a definitive decision on basketball. If we'd made a definitive decision on basketball in September, it wouldn't have counted for much, right? And how I felt in September was quite a bit different than the way I felt in December. To be honest, in September, I just knew we would, that things would work themselves out to that point where we would be ready to go. I didn't know that there was going to be this kind of second surge, and Thanksgiving would happen and the stats would change from Thanksgiving. And so I don't feel comfortable giving you an answer, because I know that 3 months from now, when we start to look at that seriously in February for March starts, the world may look quite a bit different. The vaccine may have had an impact, a huge impact. That means everybody's back to doing things close to normal. Then again, it might not. And so I'm encouraging everybody to get tested, encouraging people to take the vaccine, so we can move as a country beyond this. But a lot of it is dictated by how everybody's moving. So, I'm officially dodging that answer.
Let me follow that up quickly, though, Mr. President. In your opinion, how important is it, especially for the mental health of the student athletes, that we actually get something off this spring, considering they were the first ones to be affected by COVID and not play? So having potentially 2 years of your athletic prime away from whatever discipline that you choose, how important is that we go all in to try to play, if we can, safely this spring?
Let me tell you this. You just addressed a really important part that we don't talk about enough, and that's the mental health component, right? And let me back up. I'm gonna get to that question. I promise you, I'm gonna answer that one. But let me back up. When you talk about the mental health of staff and faculty who are asked to do things in an incredibly different way, right? We've had to totally throw their world upside down. Half of them are working from home, and they're dealing with their own family stress, right? And whether family members have caught it, because everybody knows somebody who's gotten it. Nowadays, people even know somebody who's passed away, and they're dealing with their mental health. Our students who, look, the college experience is about proximity and being close to people. And many of our campuses aren't open. Virginia State wasn't open. And even the ones that are, I mean, usually I'm the guy who wants to hang out with the students, right? We got faculty and staff who, you know how it is. There's always a mentor or somebody who, and now you got faculty and staff who are a little frightened to be in larger groups. And so you don't have that proximity on campus. And so the students aren't getting that experience that they really want. And it's affecting their mental health to take classes sometimes from their bedroom and not be able to leave. And then the athletes, of course, I mean, they've had a regimented experience for most of their lives that they don't have. Many of them had a lot of promises and dreams that they would have hoped to have happen this particular year that maybe haven't happened. And so the mental health crisis in our community is about as big as the physical health crisis. And we've got to make sure we look at it. So the CIAA is thinking very seriously about that. My athletic director and our coaches are thinking very much about that. And that is, I can't lie to you, it does play a role in how do we get back on the field. But at the same time, you know, just the physical aspects of it are just so strong. So I don't want to minimize your question because you're right. I mean, it would bring so much joy and so much stability to the campus, to the world, and to the athletes. I just don't want to sacrifice them to provide that stability.
My God. It's another sad day in America.
Painful to be introduced to George Floyd during his last breath with a cop's knee on his neck. On his neck. He deserves so much more.
How many black lives have to be taken before something is done?
We are not a threat.
I am shaking as I type.
This has got to stop.
We are sick of it.
We need conviction.
I just want us all to live.
Death will not stop until the powers that be are finally held accountable.
Don't look away from the truth until every one of us are free from white supremacy.
The world stands with you.
Criminalizing and killing of black and brown bodies is not new. It's as old as America. It's just getting filmed more.
Do you know what it feels like to be hunted? To have a new hashtag for a dead black person every single day? How does one plan a life if they aren't sure they will have a life to plan? Trayvon, Rashonda Anderson,
Deborah Dance,
Megan Flanagan, Jeremiah Hall,
Michelle Lee
Megan, Orlando Castell, Nia Wilson, Sean Webster, Stefan Breonna Taylor,
George Floyd. His name was George Floyd. Say his name.
Say his name.
George Floyd. Say his name.
Say their names. Once again, and always, we fight for justice.
Black Lives Matter.
Black Lives Matter.
Rest in power, beautiful. You didn't deserve this.
Have you had your Earthblend coffee today? At Earthblend Coffee, we take pride in offering you the very best of beans across the world, blended and roasted to perfection, giving you superior quality and satisfying and flavorful taste. Experience the world in one cup with Earthblend Coffee.
This is the Dean of the College of HBCU Sports, Kenyatta Cavil of Dr. Cavil's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. Come mix it up in the lab where the course lecture is in session every Tuesday from 6 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time on Facebook Live, YouTube Spreaker, or the BCSN app, as we discuss all things about the HBCU sports culture, including exploring the week that was in the sporting HBCU diaspora, as well as the upcoming week of HBCU sports. With me, the Dean, the College of HBCU Sports, on Dr. Cavil's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. Course lecture dismissed.
This is Bryan Fulford. A.D. Drew and I are co-hosts of the BCSN Sports Wrap. We talk about all things related to HBCU athletics. From the games, teams, coaches, and fan interest stories, we cover it all. You can find our shows on Facebook at BCSN Sports Wrap, YouTube at MyJBN Online, and everywhere you listen to podcasts like Anchor, Spotify, Google, and Apple Podcasts. You can also find the show on the Jericho Broadcast Network's app. Make sure to download. We look forward to you joining the conversation and being a part of the show. President, let's transition to some of the more pleasant news. The pleasant news affecting Virginia State and some of your fellow member institutions in the CIAA, and that was the historic gift from philanthropist MacKenzie Scott, which I think the total number for this most recent gift I saw was about maybe 17 HBCUs in total. Among other institutions and organizations, 6 of them, including Virginia State, from the CIAA, the largest single donation, $30 million to Virginia State. And so, you know, as we're seeing that report come out, I mean, that was an amazing experience, which I personally don't think got enough publicity that week. I mean, every outlet and media within Black media, HBCU media, we should have been, you know, talking about that for at least an entire week, in my personal opinion. But let's start with that, as much as you can share, how it started. Because I think there's a lot of, you know, if anybody has read the article that she wrote about how this was put together, and I'm sure Doc and Drew can will maybe ask some questions around that, but I'm curious about where the starting point was, or you know, how did you become aware of this as a opportunity? When did Virginia, you know, was it a reach from her people, or was it something you at Virginia State had to do? Start with that and maybe share what you can about the starting process to this gift that came to Virginia State a couple of, I guess about a week or two ago.
I know that one of the things that is really important to Ms. Scott and her people is that they relay the story in terms of how it happened and in terms of that process. And so I will refer you back to her article where she shared about the process as much as she wants to share. Right? I'll let her do that. I will tell you this: we are incredibly thankful. I mean, it was huge. It was huge, and for me, it was one of the biggest things that has happened at Virginia State University. And I'm so excited that, because big things like this don't happen without everybody. You know what I'm saying? I mean, when people look at Virginia State and they make a decision that they want to invest these kind of resources in Virginia State, that means that the faculty, the coaches, the staff, you know, that everybody's doing their thing and rowing in the right direction for us to get here. So it is, for me, it is one, I'm thankful that we got it, but also just the recognition to be in the number allows me to be able to tell my faculty, staff, and students that you're doing something right. We knew it, right? But now we really know it. When I talk about that we're one among the best institutions in the country, this should help prove that, right? That we are. I'm excited for all of the schools, the 6 in the CIAA and the 17 this round and the 6 last round, right? And again, I'm thankful to Ms. Scott. And I don't, how should I say this? She was very generous last June and very generous this December. I don't think she's done. And so I think that I think we will ultimately, as an HBCU community, be very, very thankful. And I'm excited about that. So, and for us, it happened at the right moment. We just finished our strategic plan, and so we've got some ideas of how to move forward. And so, man, it is groundbreaking. Our previous largest gift, I believe, that we got a couple of weeks before this gift was about $3 million. So it wasn't just the largest gift in VSU history. It was the largest gift by a mile in VSU history. So very, very proud.
I wanted to follow up and specifically look at Virginia State in terms of that an article came out that I was excited about in terms of on the research side of this, as we do the athletic talk, about a course and a program in terms of HBCU studies. I do this HBCU sports critical analysis component in developing that. So when I saw this HBCU studies, I say, that's it, there it is. And Virginia State has been in the forefront of many of HBCUs, but personalizing unique programs that really fit the community, the purpose that we have talked about throughout this show, uniquely, not to just CIAA, but in this case, in terms of Virginia State University. So you either can frame that particular course and why it's important in your opinion and how it got off the ground, but even more so, how does the money associated with Miss MacKenzie Scott, how does that help in terms of furthering pushing the envelope based on how that money is allocated and whether she put the framework of how that money could be allocated? How do you move forward with this process in terms of developing either more courses like this or even more so the programming, whether that is from concentration development in particular programs to create unique programs that push the curve, or even more unique degrees out there that allows people to specialize. And then that's on any level, undergraduate to graduate to doctoral programs. As we know, those are important things to open up some of these gaps that we talk about in this environment where we talk about Black Lives Matter, in the purpose that we talk about Kwanzaa and these kind of things when we look at it uniquely, about pushing the ability for more people from HBCUs, specifically African Americans or Black, into areas that they may have small numbers now.
Well, look, first of all, you almost answered your question in the question, right? So what the resources allow us to do is to vision in a different way across the institution, right? You can imagine that there's some of your dreams, some of our personal dreams that are held back by a limit of resources. Well, now when you get that infusion, it changes the way you think about, like your question was phrased in a perfect way. Like, what would you do to incredibly impact the community if you had the resources to do it? Those are the kind of questions that are now occurring at HBCUs where she funded. Now, I want to tell you this, Dr. Cheryl Mango, who is the one who brought the HBCU studies course to our institution, I know she'd be very excited that you gave her a shout out. To use a sports analogy, we signed her as a free agent at Virginia State, and she has made some incredible things. As one of our new LeBron Jameses, she's done an incredible job really bringing this up, and I know that she is at home right now visioning how that can be expanded. I know because I've talked to her, and I know that's exactly what she wants to do, is to see what she can do with that. And I think that's true across the institution, where it just kind of changes the mindset towards, one, how do we attract some of the best and brightest faculty and students? And how do we try to create a singular focus or a couple of singular focuses that where Virginia State can make a huge impact, right? A&T is going to do one thing, Prairie View is going to do something, Norfolk's going to do something, Voorhees is going to do something. How do we make it so that what Virginia State does is uniquely VSU and changes the world in the way that we want to see it done? And so that is exactly the kinds of things that we're thinking about. We have been one of the largest producers of Black computer engineers in the country. The question is, how do we tear that number up and double it or triple it? How do we become the place that everybody wants to come to, the way folks may go to another institution for medical school, but they come here for this? It is the biggest gift that MacKenzie Scott gave us was the ability to take a half a step back and say, what do you want? And what kind of impact do you want to make in the world? Because now you can do it. And that's even honestly bigger than the money. It's big because I found that some of the stuff could be done without it. But it's bigger than the money. It gives us the freedom to be able to do that. And that's by far the biggest gift.
Thank you for sharing.
Oh, you're welcome.
All right, Mr. President.
All right.
2020, in addition to COVID and conference churning and everything else, has also been the year of the Black Lives Matter movement. Now, you've seen donations from people like MacKenzie Scott and TikTok, whether directly or indirectly related to the Black Lives Matter movement. But, you know, we've always known Black Lives Matter because we are Black lives. We didn't need 2020 to tell us that our lives were were important. But as far as Virginia State, what has been the effect of the Black Lives Matter movement on your institution? You know, have you seen donations increase? Have you seen increase in interest, in enrollment? And then, you know, obviously, no students have been on campus right now, but how have you been able to, sit in your position as president, affect the Black Lives Matter movement for your students there on your campus, considering that everything is so virtual right now?
Well, I think let me do the students last, because I think that's the most important part. So I'll do the easy part first. It's brought a level of visibility across public and private partnerships that HBCUs haven't always had. If you go back even to the election, the presidential election on the Republican side and the Democratic side, both of them included HBCUs as a part of their talking points, as a part of what they want to do. As we look to pass stimulus bills, the conversation about HBCUs is at the forefront. And so it's important for us to keep it at the forefront. And the way we keep it at the forefront, and this is part of the conversation we had earlier, Dr. Cavil, is that I'm not saying that we're not looking for reparations, because we deserve them. But the real issue is that we are the best return on investment in terms of institutions that you can get in this country, right? So an investment in it, and the reason why we haven't graduated more students is because we haven't always had the resources to do even more than we already do. And so the fight isn't just for remember what you used to do, but look, if you want to make a real change, we have talent in our communities that isn't getting an opportunity. And so you won't have to import that talent, but if you give it the money to us, we'll make the talent for you, right? And so we need to continue to be at the front of the conversation, letting people know how important it is, whether it's public, private, state, federal, that a gift, that a donation, that an investment in an HBCU is going to pay off for the nation, because we've always paid off for the nation. Because we were the first thing established around Black Lives Matter. Right, that's who we are, right? Established right around the end of the Civil War. So now to the students, because I think that's really the crux of it. To see so many students involved in the protest movement, in the civil unrest movement, in the summertime, in the Black Lives Matter movement, to see our HBCU students, by and large, across the country, leading the way in the front, in the back, and in the middle, has been one of the greatest joys of being an HBCU president. To see students who you knew were active, you knew cared about their community, but to see their interests and their passion rise to a different level during the movement, and that's still going on, has really been incredible. And so watching them lead us has been one of my greatest pleasures. And I think that's what we have to do now, coming out of, as COVID starts to fade and we start to get, is to continue to foster that environment, to foster that next generation of leaders who have made some incredible changes. There are things that have been done in the past 6 months that could not have been done without the work of students on the front line. Some of the statues that have come down, we try to do that for years. Is the young people that made that happen. The interest that MacKenzie Scott has. She even said it in her letter. It was from young people that stimulated her interest in helping certain social organizations. And so we have a lot to thank for them. And our challenge is to create an environment where they can continue to lead us because they're just that good.
President Abdullah, I'm curious if you feel that and I don't know if you've had maybe an opportunity to really think about this, but MacKenzie Scott's donation, I personally think, has changed the way that people will give to HBCUs. I framed it in a way or I like to think of it in a way, is there's a difference between working with HBCUs and or doing something with HBCUs and doing something for HBCUs. And I think a lot of, and I'm going to call it out, a lot of entertainers, celebrities are doing things, quote unquote, thinking it's for HBCUs, but really it has other interests, you know, or have connections to it. What I liked about what she did is, I think it was purely, she gave this money and then said, go do something with it. There's no secondary company, no other agency. There's nothing else tied to it related to MacKenzie Scott. Do you think going forward, as you think about donations, and that may come from the private sector, maybe even alum, I don't even want to say alumni, because alumni are going to give because that's their heart. So we're talking outside people who want to be a part of the HBCU experience and culture. Do you think her gift will change how we should kind of view the doing for HBCUs and doing with HBCUs?
I hope she inspires bigger gifts, bigger, more unrestricted gifts. And so I do hope that happens. But having said that, though, I think that, everybody gives for a different reason. And, I'm not going to throw water on anybody's reason for giving. Because I'm appreciative whenever they decide to give to Virginia State University. And so whatever your reason or whatever your amount, and however you want to do that, and however restricted, you want it just for scholarships or you want it just for athletics. Different people give for different reasons. So I'm forgive me for kind of moving slightly away from your question. But I just think that people should give, right? I mean, at a certain level, it boils down to not really how much, but just to get into the habit of giving. Last year, we did a little funny video trying to encourage people to give to HBCUs. And I said this: you should give to at least 3. One, you should give to Virginia State. Hey, I'm asking, so you should always give to Virginia State. You should give to your alma. That's right. You should give to your alma mater. And you should give and if you didn't go to an HBCU, the one closest to your alma mater. And you should give to the HBCU closest to the one where you live now. That those 3 institutions, right, deserve some gift. And it could be $100, $20. You can restrict it for scholarships or have it unrestricted. And so I don't want to, let's put it this way. That gift was incredible, but the need is even more incredible. And so I still want everybody to give some money. I'm still a preacher passing the plate. And so if you got a different reason for giving, that's okay with me. Your reason is okay with me as long as there's money in the pot.
Well, let me say this. You got me, President Abdullah. I've done 2 of the 3. So that means I have to get off the plate and get up there, and I got to say something to Virginia State. I got to add that. You won that.
Giving.vsu.edu. Giving.vsu.edu.
That's smart. Get it out there. Market it. Get it out there. And so I've make sure I've noted that, and I'll do that before the end of the day, because I don't want to say something live that I hadn't done when they check back and get it on the record. Like, where that Cavil stuff come from?
In that case, then, and I'll return the favor and I'll give the Texas Southern.
I appreciate it. Perfect, man. That's awesome. With that being said, I want to frame this again. Obviously, there's been a chatter with MEAC and the SWAC, and I know they're in the CIAA. And I know with your position that you may not be able to answer this in terms of just telling us what's going to be happening. Now, if you want to share breaking news here, we're open for that. Don't let me not let you answer that question.
Okay.
But if you would frame this in there, as we talked about from the CIAA perspective, now we're looking in it from Virginia State University. Obviously, you have what is taking place in terms of that. What do you have look at specifically from Virginia State University when people come calling and saying, hey, you may look at this? Or what are your expectations from your AD? And who would make that call? Is that a community-driven call? Alumni saying they want to do this? Is this an athletic director position that makes this call? Is it from your perspective, presidency or your board. You know, you have constituents and you answer to a board.
Right.
Give us, at least from that framework, how do you look at this in terms of folks pulling at you saying, we want to do this? Can you provide us a framework, at least, of how you would think or others may think in terms of what that process would look like in terms of conference churning? Let's just put it that way.
Right. I got you. So I think just to kind of go through a process of anything that will be that big, right? And it's big because it's, it's something that the community sees. It's something that, it's huge. I mean, you all already know. I think the first thing is that you would want to really be able to trust the experts that you have around you. And so again, as I said, I've got an incredible athletic director, Mrs. Peggy Davis. I got a wonderful CFO, Mr. Kevin Davenport. I got a wonderful provost, Dr. Donald Palm, and our head of our faculty senate, Dr. Shabanu. And so I think the conversation would have to start with something like this. Does it make sense athletically, right? I mean, just regardless of the resources, does it make sense athletically? And the athletic director would have to give you a feeling or a sense for that, right? I mean, at least at an early stage, just a sense to see whether it's even worth taking a look at. But does it make sense financially? I think your athletic director and your CFO would have to give you a sense of, is it something we should even be considering? And during COVID makes it even more challenging because there's so much that's unknown. I mean, right now, there's people I'm not sure if we were D1, whether we'd be playing, right? So if we're not playing at D1 or D2, what is it? So does it make sense financially? And then from a culture / academic perspective, does it make sense? And so you've got your faculty and your provost kind of say, well, does it line up with the values, if you will, of Virginia State University? And I think because it's so important, I think the alums and particularly the boosters and definitely the board, everybody would need to weigh in. Not that everybody would agree, right? But that you have to hear from your constituency, with the students, the faculty, the parents, to get an idea of, again, is this something worth doing? The ultimate decision, if you will, for something like that, it's a day-to-day activity, so it kind of lies here with the president. But there's some aspects of it that make it so important that the board would not just have to weigh in, but they would be a real big part of the decision-making process. Again, trying to answer those questions as the having fiduciary responsibility for Virginia State. Does it make sense for our mission? Does it make sense athletically? Does it make sense financially? I know some institutions have gotten, consulting help to work through some of those processes. I think it's always good at some point to just kind of know, to have information about stuff like that. So it's a terribly, I know that for Florida A&M and for Bethune-Cookman, and even just changing conferences, that the amount of work that they put in to be able to do that was just incredible. So it's definitely not a frivolous thing. Definitely not.
Certainly. Last question.
I can break some news that we will be playing in the NCAA, next year. I promise you, we will be
not going down to NAIA.
No, we're gonna be in the NCAA. You can quote it. You can print that.
Oh, okay.
I like it. Hey, coaches, just so y'all know, y'all all on the clock.
All right.
With that final question here is that, and we'll leave this really for you, is we had a lot of great dialogue, and you've really taken us on a trip and a journey to explain so many different things from a leadership perspective, and we really appreciate that. Is there anything that we didn't ask you that you really want to get out that is important to your constituents that we would like to give you this time to expound on in any direction that you want to share that information?
I appreciate it. I think what I'll share is this, not just to my constituents, but to all of my colleagues in the CIAA, all of my presidential colleagues in Virginia, and my HBCU presidential colleagues across the country. I think we've all gotten a lot closer and spent more time together as we work through these challenges. And I can say this, and I think people would be, and that's why I have trouble criticizing someone else's decision, because I've talked to so many people who love their institution so much. who care about their institution that they lead so much. And whether we're talking about athletic directors or coaches, every single person, to a man and woman, at the presidential level, at the AD level, at the VP level, is giving everything they can to make sure that their institution and their division can be a success. And I just would love for folks to really understand that they may, I'm sure that there are fans and alums who disagree with some of the decisions, and that's fine. I think, you know, we understand that, and we're okay with criticism and disagreement. But I think really understanding that all of those decisions, whether you disagree with them or not, came out of love of your institution, came out of what they thought was best, even if they were wrong, right? Because we can certainly be wrong, but it all came out of love and respect and honor for the current institution, the current student athletes, and the legacy of the institution. And that's the one thing I wish that people could be in the room so they could hear it, because it is it's palpable. The love that people have for this, that presidents have for their institution, that ADs have for their institutions, is palpable. And so I really believe, particularly in the CIAA, that all of our schools are in incredibly good hands with the leadership that we have. So I'll close with that.
AD, I know you had a final question as well for President.
Yeah, I want to get my final question off. First of all, President Abdullah, I have been on your campus one time about 15 years ago when I was working at Tuskegee University, and we were doing a project in collaboration with Virginia State because they are both land grant institutions. So we were working on the project together. So I was on that.
Who are you working with? Who are you working with?
Now you had asked me too many questions. I'd have to go back and pull out my notes, but I do know that whatever it was, the research was published and my name is in the publication. I just don't remember what publication that it was that we were it was with your cooperative extension program there, probably around 2006, somewhere up in that time. But number one, and that was a total sidebar, by the way. my question is to you: once we get through this COVID-19 situation, what does Virginia State look like post COVID-19, and what are your goals for VSU once we get all these vaccines and everything else behind us and we get back to whatever our new normal is?
On a day-to-day basis, I want to take the knowledge and the information and the successes that we've had during COVID and apply them to after COVID. Our ability to register students, to go through our financial processes almost entirely online. I want to be able to do that after COVID. The ability of our faculty to do online and remote instruction and face-to-face instruction, and to be able to serve our students whether they're on campus or not. We want to be able to apply that back to campus. And I think that's true for everybody, right? So the things that we had a lot of success during COVID. I don't want that success to go away. So we want to use that strategically as it relates to our strategic plan. I actually dropped it earlier. I want to see Virginia State be the nation's leader by far in graduating Black computing graduates. That's where our strategic plan was headed. That's where our conversation with the state was headed. And that's where we want to get back on that track and moving forward in that direction. I think that COVID is like a turn, right? You go into the turn, you got to slow down a little bit. But as we come out of that turn, it's going to be a time to accelerate and move towards our strategic dream, because now's the time to do that. Right now, you asked the right question. It is the question that I'm asking my staff to continue to think about, and envisioning the future and implementing it today is exactly what we're going to do.
And I've got to follow this up. As a two-time graduate of an HBCU, I'm here to tell you, if you could keep the registration and the financial aid process painless, because that was probably the most painstaking time for me as a student, and led me to say words to other folk that I do not normally say because of the frustrations with that process. So for my children, my grandchildren not to have to go through that frustration, please, Mr. President, please bottle that up and sell it.
Well, look, let me say this before, because I know I'm gonna have students and faculty watching. It still isn't painless. It's not painless at Virginia State, but we've had to do it all remotely And I think that's going to help us drag some of the pain out of it, right? We still got some work to do to get all the pain out, but I think we've got a template to start to bring some of the pain out of the process. So we got work to do, and we're going to get there.
Yeah. President Abdullah, we appreciate your time. I mean, it's an honor that you are the first president, HBCU president, to be a part of our show. And so it's an honor, and I got to give a shout out to my friend Osha B. Craig, who worked with you there at Virginia State. And I know he used to tell me great things about you and what you and your staff are doing at Virginia State, and hearing it and getting a chance to have that conversation with you through this platform, I see it. And so it's not just words. And so, again, we're very appreciative of your transparency and just everything you've shared with us about the CIAA, Virginia State, HBCUs in general. It's much appreciated. And look, we wish you and your staff and everyone at Virginia State much health and success in 2021. And hopefully we'll have you back on again when we are in our new normal and everyone is, vaccinated up and we are living our best life again, post-COVID and all of those good things. So let people know how they can, again, contact you via Twitter, how they can support and give to Virginia State, and so on and so forth. So I'll let you give all the plugs here before we close.
Thank you very much. And first, again, shout out to Mr. Craig and them two beautiful daughters of his, who we love so dearly, and we miss him. We miss him at Virginia State. Getting to me is easy. I'm a @away. My tag or handle wherever is my name, Makola Abdullah. So you can always find me. Giving to Virginia State, giving.vsu.edu. It's almost the end of the year. If you want to do a year-end gift, we'd be more than happy. And last but certainly not least, if you ever have me on, I do love talking about sports. And I see you got Kobe, rest in peace, behind you. And, LeBron James is my favorite player of all time, and not coincidentally, the greatest of all time. And so if you ever want to invite me back to have that conversation, I'm more than ready.
For sure. As we get ready to talk about the 2021 CIAA season, you're going to be one of the first people on the guest list, no doubt.
I'm ready. I'm ready.
All right. Well, again, Dr. Cavil, we appreciate you coming in and joining us on the Sports Wrap as always. Make sure you listen to Dr. Cavil's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab, beginning again, brand new in 2021, every Tuesday night, 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central. Make sure you follow Doc at Inside the HBCU Sports Lab on Twitter. Of course, you can follow his own Twitter feed at Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, KenyattaCavil. And that's where you can find Doc. Of course, shout out to Mike Washington and Charles Bishop, also part of the Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. Drew, follow him at BCSN Drew is where you can find him on Twitter. Make sure to check out the website, mybcsn.net, part of the Black College Sports Network, and of course, Jericho Broadcasting Network. So you can find me at DRB365. So again, gentlemen, President Abdullah, thank you for your time. We hope you enjoyed this. Happy New Year, everybody. And let's have a great 2021. Be safe, mask up, and make sure you give to Virginia State or the nearest HBCU in your community, or your nearest HBCU that your family and friends went to. Make sure to give. That's the important message that we want to make sure we get out to in 2021. So for everyone here on the Sports Wrap, thank you. God bless, and peace out.
Holla.
Support the Black College Sports Network so we can continue to provide you coverage. Go to myjbn.com/support and be a part of the Black College Sports Network.
But my beats, they are hard.